50 years ago, I arrived at Boron Station for the first time. Today, I can still feel again that same excitement. I was greeted most charmingly by Mrs. Delius, who was waiting at the end of the platform for me. Immediately, she made it quite clear my coming was something which she'd longed for so many years. What she wanted above all else was for Delius to start composing again. She told me that they had lived in Grez for 30 years, and that it was on this road, between the station and the village, that her husband had contemplated all his finest music. The village has changed. There are more houses and shops, but the main street is much as it was. Delius's house is now the country home of a well-to-do Parisian. Certainly, no experience in my life could ever equal that on all planes, too, I think, in a sense, music and emotional. I mean, this was an experience. And Grez, I felt when I was away for it, was my home. I was attracted to it almost as much as Delius was. I go out here, and I can, it's, all the music of Delius begins to come into my mind. I hear it all. But this place, to me, this is where his spirit is. I am sure his spirit is here today. I would have loved to have lived here for the rest of my life. I can recall what happened when I arrived here as if it was yesterday. I was taken to my room through the music room. After about an hour or so, Mrs. Delius came upstairs and said, "Now, Delius will see you." And I well remember standing at the door over there and advancing very nervously across the room to where Delius was sitting, dressed in white, most fastidious, obviously, in this exquisite silk white shirt, a rug thrown over his knees, completely emaciated creature with a very extraordinary expression, a very serene expression on his face. And of course, he held his hand out to me like that and said, "Oh, come in, Fenby." And I came across the room to him and greeted him. And it was a very moving experience. Moreover, when I came into this room, there was a tension which I felt immediately. And that tension was to remain with me for 6 years. After a few weeks, Delius felt able to start work, but what a disaster. In this very room, oh, dreadful, one Sunday night, he sent for me and he said, "Fenby, I've got a simple tune I want you to take down. And get pen and paper and begin." And I sat down here, and the old man said, "Are you ready?" And thrust his head back and began, "Da, da, 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 da." Got it? "Da, da, 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 da." Got it? Well, it went on like that until the end. I could bear it no longer. And I rushed out to that door, and Yelka came in at that door. And she said, "Fred, what have you done?" And as I stood, closing that door behind me, on my way up to my room, beside the music room, I heard him say, "Yelka, that boy is useless. He's no good. He cannot take down a simple tune." I thought I'd be asked to leave the next morning. You see, I came here because I had had a very unusual musical upbringing. I'd always prided myself that my ear was the one reason why I became a musician, as indeed it was. And that, of course, meant that what was my strongest weapon had been utterly derided. But I did think, at least, that nobody on earth could have made head or tail of that extraordinary recital. Yelka said, "I am behind you. I've got faith in you." And that was the beginning. And from there, it began to work. I've been, in many ways, very much a loner. And one of the things that even pleased me when I heard from the Deliuses at the beginning was that there would be very little life here. And that delighted me. Because prior to that, I mean, I was really beginning to contemplate very seriously whether I would have joined the Benedictine order or something like that. So, I mean, it didn't prove very difficult for me to endure, as some people would endure, the long silences. I didn't even know the curé in that time. I merely went to church and then came away. You see, the point is, I've always been a churchman all my life, and to go to Mass is just part of my life. But to Delius, it was anathema. He banned me from hearing Mass in this church. In the summertime, of course, it was absolutely marvelous at Grez. Wonderful place to be in. And we had this beautiful, long, flat-bottomed boat, and he could be put most comfortably in that. And then I would row him right up to the Bout du Monde, and the end of the world, as they used to call it, and then he used to turn it round, he said, and when we got up there, and let it drift, and we just drifted gently by. And so then he would ask, you know, what are the water lilies lovely this time, and how are the poplars looking? Yes, wonderful. And there's nobody fishing in front of my garden. Never moved away from Grez without a longing to be back again. And for 40 years of his life, this was the very center of his... He breathed the air of Grez, and it went into his music. The air was full of Delius. Elgar once said, there's music all around, and you just take what you please. And this is precisely, I think, what happened with Delius here. I realized, only God knows how difficult it was. Because here was a man who didn't like to talk about music, who hated every technical term, never used one in all the 6 years I was here, and so on, and had his own way with music, hated everybody else's music but his own, and it made it very difficult in me to think that, there was just a creak of light that I might be able to widen into a fuller focus on this man's music. You see, the real problem was that Delius insisted in doing the opposite from most composers, writing his music straight into the score, conceiving it entirely in terms of orchestral colorings, weaving a tapestry of orchestral sound. And he said, I'm not going to plaster my scores like Elgar did with all directions and so on. If they can't feel the music instinctively, why do they play it? And he said, I'd rather they didn't play it. One performance of my music a year is worth 200 performances by people who don't understand it. Delius was a very proud man. Not one note would he have allowed of mine. What I did do, I think, was to always to encourage him. That was the great thing. And when I liked something, I always said so, you see. I was his great encouragement in music. And you see, the point is, by the time we'd been working together for about 3 years, he had implicit belief in me. I mean, I saw all these scores through the publishers. He left everything to me, and when people wrote to me, he just said, leave it to Eric, he'll do it. And so it was, you see. He really, it was the most wonderful relationship. The last years, the first 2 years were very, very difficult. I wouldn't like to go through those years, but the ones where we really began to understand each other, it was quite remarkable, wonderful. But there was one occasion only in the whole of my time there when he dictated away from the piano. I was summoned here, and I came rushing down here to find Delius sitting here under what used to be a great elder tree. Now, since removed, it fell down one day. And then there was, along here, a stone table, and he was sitting in his little carriage, waiting quite impatiently. Bring pen and paper. He said, I've thought of a new opening for our piece, The Song of Summer. Now, So I quickly came back again with my usual implements. Now, he said, I want you to imagine that we're sitting on the cliffs, looking out to sea. This is Yorkshire, with the heather, beautiful clear sky. Now then, strings. Now, subdivide your strings, 7/4 in a bar. Lowest note, the A on the violas, and then D, like this. Second violin's F sharp and D, like that, above, yes, and then dovetail the firsts A and top F sharp, yes. Now that's going to hold 4 beats, write that down. I want you to imagine that the waves are just lapping up against the shore. Cellos and basses, G sharp, A and D on the last 3 notes of that bar. G sharp, in octaves, that's right, with the cellos and basses. And then hold that chord again, and then move it on again, yes, that's... Now there, I want the waves to come up like this. Or F sharp, B, C sharp, F, yes. I want the flute to run up in tia, tia. That will suggest a seagull just floating by the end. Yes, that's it. That's right. Now then, we want just a horn call, just to give a sense of distance. Then bring those chords down again. No, not that way. Now, we'll have another chord there. G, E, C sharps in the, and an A and an E. That's right, now I've got you. Yes, now then, do the same, with the same rhythm for the oboe. Another suggestion of a bird fluttering by. It was the easiest thing that I ever did whilst I was there, because he had every detail in his mind of the first 15, 16 bars or so of that particular piece. That was the only occasion on which Delius ever evoked a visual image of what he was trying to express. He was the dictator and I was the pen, and I was really trying to catch these last notes of Delius, which would have flown away long before I could have got hold of them. When we came to the end of 1933, I left on the understanding that I would go back if he had any more works to do. And when I was called back, it was not really to work with him in a musical sense, but to look after him physically, because his wife had been taken away and was being operated on for cancer. The last days were terrifying. And then he began to slip away. The doctor drew me aside. He said, Monsieur Fenby, I have to tell you that your friend is dying of syphilis, and nothing at this stage, nor perhaps in the past, could have been done for him. You seem to be the only person in charge here, and I must tell you that he is in such a state that I very much doubt whether he'll last more than a few hours. It was a shock in that there was no visible evidence of anything like that. Delius was a most fastidious man, and I regarded him really as a man who, through unfortunate circumstances, had become physically but cruelly emaciated. And that was the end of it. It had never occurred to me. Then it was a shock. On the other hand, not so much, because I knew that he'd certainly enjoyed himself to the full with women. And he made no bones about that at all. On the day Delius died, he never looked any different from the day in which, 6 years ago, I first saw him sitting there. Despite his appalling physical condition, he hung on to life. Life was good. I mean, he had been a yay-sayer to life all his life. And the mind, of course, that was the point. The mind, to the last, was absolutely as clear as possible. And then he began to realize, this was the dreadful part. He said, now, Eric, I must tell you that if I die, I want certain things doing. He wanted me to have all his manuscripts. And he wanted me to have a certain sum of money, because I'd worked here au pair for the 6 years. But when he said to me, if there comes a time when they have to start giving me morphia and drugs, I want you to fight them, physically fight them, to stop the needle going into me. And the most awful things that I remember were the last hours when he was in such appalling pain that he was screaming for my help to prevent their doing so, and I, in fact, was having to aid them. And that's something that I'll never forget. That's the most awful thing that happened in this house. And he just came to, just momentarily, when I reached his bedside, and I held him in my arms, and then he died. The immediate problem was that he would have to be buried in the churchyard at Grez. This is where Delius did all his greatest work. This is where his spirit remains, and this is where he should, I think, have been left in peace. But I think that the English friends had prevailed, and they had made a final arrangement that it would have to be in England. And so, the following year, the body was exhumed, and I travelled with it to Loing and took it to arrive at Limpsfield a few minutes before midnight. Delius's last wish was to be buried in a country churchyard near London, where friends could tend his grave. Limpsfield in Surrey was the chosen place. Yes, I felt today, just as I understand a drowning man feels, that the whole panorama of his life is quickly before his eyes. And it seemed to me that I remembered our first meeting at Grez and all the difficulties and yet delightful times that we had together. I'm going away now, but I'm leaving my heart at Grez. In his own way, like Shakespeare, he touched upon the common things of life and touched them with genius. With Delius, of course, what were these common things of life? The sense of partings, the spirit of transience, which none of us can evade in our lives. All these things, too, Delius, in his works, has presented in the terms of almost unbearable poignancy. Well, he was a poet of nature. He was a poet of life, as he saw it, in his very singular-minded way. I realize that the greater part of Delius's finest music was written long before I was ever thought of. And, but what pleases me and I couldn't help but feel it very strongly in my recent visit to Grez, was that at least two works, The Song of Summer and The Songs of Farewell particularly, I'm sure that they have gained their proper place in the canon of Delius's finest work. It was just a human relationship, almost that of father and son, and it ended up like that, most certainly. And in that, I discovered a man not only unusual, but of incredibly sensitive gifts. And to me, in composition, genius is the only thing that matters. And therefore, I would never, never regret what I have done in the service of genius.